first two-thirds of the text is basically a very traditional way of reading a text, or traditional for him, nothing new about that. And the real thing we'll get to only on the last third of his text. That was the first thing. The text is about this portion of text from Maimonides, and basically it's about the last expression. The text of Maimonides, the text of the Maimonides speaks about the dog draw, and he almost repeats the words of the Mishnah. The dog draw, if the shepherds eat from them, then it's considered to be matzah, and you can eat it on the first night. And if they don't eat from it, then not. And then Maimonides add this expression, which you don't find in the Mishnah, and we are trying to figure out the logic of how these two parts relating to each other, and each part by itself, if it makes sense. And the expression was she'eina meshumeret l'shem, mipnei she'eina meshumeret l'shem matzah, because it is not guarded for the sake of matzah. Now, so he begins with a very commonsensical reading of the text. I think some of us offer that by themselves. If you go back to the Mishnah, then why matzah and challah, and so if the roim don't eat from it, it's patur, and so because it's not lechem, it's not a bread, it's not bread. That was the first thing. And then immediately we come to if the issue is not bread, then why the Maimonides added this clause of enam shumeret l'shem matzah. So now he tries several rounds. The first round was to take the Mishnah and to try to understand the Mishnah according to the understanding of Rabbi Shimshon Mishan's, which is the classical commentary for someone like a Lithuanian Jew in that time. So he looks at that and he sees that Shimshon Mishan's adds to the Mishnah a reason why it's challah. If he doesn't eat from that, then if the shepherd do not eat from this door, then it doesn't have to have challah. And because he says, he connects that to Midrash Halacha. And he says, Me'arisotechem, your door and not the door of the dog. So we have to distinguish between, and now he tries to say, okay, that, so that's what can we conclude from this way of Shimshon Mishan's reading of this Mishnah? He says, if he has to add this specific way of studying the halacha, it's not for dog, only for not specifically from deducing it from the text from the Chumash, from the biblical text, then apparently the very simple reason that it's not bread is not relevant, and therefore we have to say it is bread, but nevertheless you cannot, you don't take out of it the portion for the Kohen. Why? Because there is a special deduction from the text according to our formal early deduction of halachot from the Midrash, and therefore, but then what happened is that the Mishnah of the list, that the Mishnah give us the challah and matzah and me'arvim and mevachim and mezabnim, etc., etc. That applies only to challah. That applies only to the portion that you give to the Kohen. But the other reasons, the other things do not follow the same logic. Now you have to explain each one what is the logic of. So he said, okay, put aside the whole en mevachim, en mezamnim, etc. We are not going again to explain. You don't have to bless on that, because all of that is not like the original halacha. This is only a decision of the rabbis that they added. And the rabbi, when they added it under certain condition that it should be for human food. It should be all of these things that you do with the food should have this, should be appropriate for human food and not for others. But as a decision, it has nothing to do with the logic of the halacha. That is an addition. So we are staying with two issues which are original halacha. One is the challah, the portion to the Kohen, and the other is the matzah. So the challah, we have an explanation, but what about matzah? We are left without any explanation. So now if you accept this kind of then you say, okay, Maimonides, let's read the Mishnah and have to dissect it to different kind of halachot, because the issue of challah he puts in one place, and the issue of matzah he puts in Passover. It's not like the Mishnah that it's all one list. So in challah, it has its own reason, but in matzah, he has to explain why, because now it's by itself. So why matzah, or it doesn't have to, but it makes sense that he will. And therefore, he adds something else that we don't have, and that is she'ena meshumeret l'shem matzah. So the point is, although in contrast to what we thought, okay, if it's lechem, then we don't need the other part. It says no. If it's lechem, it's good for the issue of challah, but it doesn't explain why matzah is not, because only as if you accept the interpretation of Rabbi Shimshon Mishatz. So we are again, we are in a very good state now that we say, okay, Maimonides, it makes sense that he adds this thing because he needs explanation why something which, although it's lechem, it's still needs. Okay, so that was the first one, and now immediately we fall. He shows that fails. This explanation fails again. How does it fail? He says first, this formal deduction Aristotelian from the biblical text. First, who tells you that, or how do you know that it goes to say that challah is not proper for when it's done for the purpose of dogs or for animals? How do you know that most of the formal deduction can apply to a concept? So how do you know that it doesn't apply, and it makes sense if you know that it doesn't apply to the concept of bread, and telling you that bread is such a thing that you do for humans and not for animals. For animals, you do food, like in the German, the Essen and Fressen and things like that. We don't necessarily even have the same name for that, food for animals and food for humans. So he says, the point is that what you study there is that it's not bread. And bread is a very human thing that you eat. What you give to the animal, it can look like bread or whatever, but it's not bread. And therefore, if that is the case, then the question comes back. But he says, okay, and then all of that he says like, by the by, because he says immediately, even if you don't accept that last point that I made, you still have a very serious problem. And the problem is that you have to deal, or Maimonides in the explanation is that you have to explain the Mishnah in Psachim, the Talmud in Psachim. That's the Talmud in Psachim, and we have seen it yesterday more in details, that there are a few things that are piled together in the name of Rabbi Meir, And it seems like also they have some kind of the same logic. So, Maser Sheni, if you have like a dough, which is made from this thing which the halachic status of it is Maser Sheni. It's a certain kind of food that has something to do with the temple. I don't want to get into the discussion of what it is now, but it has a certain kind of sacredness that can be actually, you can turn the sacredness under certain, if you do certain kind of exchange, you can take the sacredness away from that and put it on something else. But before that, you have something. Now you take this something which you already have, like you had a lot of wheat, which was already under this category of Maser Sheni, of this food which is sacred. And then Rabbi Meir says, from that, you don't take out the portion to the Kohen. Now, for the simplicity of the thing, why you don't add, because he says the taking out the portion for the Kohen, that's the commonsensical reading of that. To take out the portion of to the Kohen is to take something out of non-sacred thing and to make it into sacred, but that is already sacred. So you don't take from the sacred and make it sacred. That's exactly the point that's what the first thing. And the other thing was matzah of Maser Sheni, the same kind of sacredness status, but this time on matzah. Can you eat this kind of matzah and to do the mitzvah of eating matzah of the first night with that? And he says no, because he says no, okay? And the third thing was, which is also commonsensically before the Talmud, you just feel like, yeah, because it's not yours, you don't do mitzvah with something else. I mean, there are many possibilities. Okay. And the third thing was etrog, which was this citrus that we use in Sukkot in order, again, to do something. Now, what will be etrog, which is also has this status of Maser Sheni? And he says also in that case, you cannot use it in order to do the mitzvah of using this etrog. And all of these issues, that is a disagreement between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim and the other scholars or the scholars. And so again, this is a Mishnah. This Mishnah is a pile of, this is Rav Asi. He gives a pile of Tanaik or Mishnaic or Tanaik or Braita or decisions. And somehow it looks like connected to each other because it's all about Maser Sheni and all about, yeah. And then comes the Gemara and says, let's see if it works, that it indeed follows the same logic or indeed if it's at all the same thing. And that is Rav Papa. Rav Papa is a Mora from the Talmud, and he says, if we talk about Isa shel Maser Sheni, dough, which has the status of this Maser Sheni, then it's okay. I understand why Rabbi Meir think what he thinks, because he deduced early deduction of halacha, midrash, he deduced from arisoteichem, that is the word in the Bible, arisoteichem, and he deduced from that's your doors. So it has to be yours. And what does it mean that it has to be yours? Yours are not of animals. So only things that belong to you. Sorry, not animals. Animals jumped me from the other. Yours are not Maser Sheni. It has, because Maser Sheni belongs already this status of sacredness is not yours. It's not entirely yours. Everything which is sacred is not entirely yours according to the halachic. We are not going into it. Okay, so that's I understand. He says, okay. Also in the case of the etrog, the citrus on Sukkot. Also there, the Bible says, the biblical text is formulating the issue, ulekachtem lachem, that you have to take, there is an extra expression here, which is specifying something according to this logic of deduction from the early Talmudic time. לכן, why do you add this specification of lachem? And he says, because it has to be of your thing and not of something else. And what is something else? Maser sheni. Okay, so it has to be yours. Fine. But now he goes to matzah and he says, Ela matzah, but in the case of matzah, is there any text that says matzatchem, namely your matzah, in any way of expression, this genitive, this possessive way of understanding that it has to be yours and not this thing which is sacred? There is nothing like that in the Bible. So he says, why? So then how do you know that? So he breaks the whole story into, like, there is no one logic here about Isa, Etrog, Maser Sheni. So everything here has like a specific early, and I don't want to sign on what I'm saying now. Now it's a statement. Okay. It's a statement that is done by someone that is sitting here, but it's not me. Something maskilic. I think sometimes that Rav Papa and people like have to be also people who come from Palace Eretz Israel to Bavel have more additional, have more respect to deducing halakha from to retracing halakha to midrash halakha. Then the Bavel, what we know, the more wild Babylonian Amoraim. That's also sometimes, it's not like not entirely do, but they are more focused on the logic. They are less focused on the way of deduction. So I think it's not atypical that Rav Papa here is one of those who will ask it, if it is indeed Rav Papa. Anyway, okay, that was not me, now me. Yeah. Matkif la Rav Papa, Bishlo Ma'isa, Etrog, Matzah. Okay. And then to answer to that is Rova or Rava. And he says, Atya, he's how Rabbi Meir, why does he think like that? He studied the expression lechem, the expression bread that appears one time in the Bible, to the expression bread that appears in another place. One appears in relation to challah, to the portion of the Kohen. One appears in the context of matzah, and he says, "Ktiv ha'chalechem lechem oni." Ktiv, it's here. It's expressed lechem oni. That's the matzah should be bread of poverty, but bread. And there is in the case of challah, in the case of the portion of the Kohen, v'aya baruch lechem mi lechem haaretz. So he says, ma lehalan mishelachem, af kan mishelachem. Anyway, the formality of that, which is interesting, and I think it's in some way even Reb Chaim, I mean, you don't suspect, no one who study Reb Chaim, especially those that yeshiva, and after that, don't suspect Reb Chaim really to follow the maskilic understanding of the text, right? It's not like he couldn't care less about such thing. But the point is, I think that it's interesting because this lechem, it's not like Zerat HaKatuv, it's not Zera Shava, it's something that they just like say, okay, here the expression is lechem, here the expression, let's see what you have here about lechem, let's look what you have here about lechem. It looks like something very late for being midrash halacha, something like just a common sense. That's lechem. Just then you have to play with that with your concept of lechem. It's not even. It's not like anything like that. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Not sure I understand. Mishelachem. Are they trying to say that lechem haaretz is possessive because it's your haaretz, and oni is because it's your oni?
No, lechem no, and here it says. Moment. No, it's not because lechem haaretz. Haaretz is not shelachem. Haaretz is God.
Exactly.
That is their first Rashi on the Torah.
Yes, I know.
No, the point. Okay, the point is like that. You have here lechem and you have here lechem. And he says, whatever you say on lechem in the case of the portion to the Kohen, you have to say on lechem in the case of matzah. Since you already have seen, that's what you say. What do you say about lechem in the case of the portion to the Kohen? You say that it cannot be for Maser Sheni. It has to be yours. From that you say lechem on that. That's also in the other case without anything saying day. But if that is the point of lechem that you use for a religious thing, then also in that case you cannot use something that's okay. That is the point of Reb Chaim. He says, okay, the whole point of that I said before that it's not lechem, and even if it's lechem, it's not that. I cannot notice that even if it's lechem, I cannot study from one to the other because we followed Rabbi Shimshon Mishan's logic of explaining the Mishnah. Now he says, if you follow this Babylonian Talmudic text, which Maimonides of course knew, which is very central, no one skipped this. Anyone who studied the Tractate of Psachim knows that, including Maimonides. And there is no reason to think why Maimonides will not follow this won't have it in mind when he writes the point. This text actually says that if you have lechem in one place, what you actually study is that for lechem in that case have to be also lechem in that case. So in the same that's in the Mishnah, you have Isata Klavim because it's lechem, but it has to be lechem of yours. So the same will be in the matzah. So we went back to the first point, the square one, where we have Maimonides without ability to explain why Maimonides think here, why he puts together two clauses, two parts of this section, which on one hand speaks about Isata Klavim, on the other hand bring in this Ena Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah. And we have to explain it. So we are in square one. And as I said, two things yesterday, repeated it, and now I repeat it again, which I think is important to notice. First, what Reb Chaim does here is a very typical, seriously, anyone who studied, I think, at the yeshiva knows that every Rosh Yeshiva should know how to do something like that. This is nothing special this is not Soloveitchik. He's just giving a very traditional argument. You can find anyone who knows how to play with text should know how to do it.
How do you define the difference between special and non-special?
Between?
The special move and the non-special move.
In Reb Chaim?
But you said the typical move is special. Because, if we also look at it backwards and say whatever they do is trace to Reb Chaim.
The last sentence again.
The
absent did you there is.
Also go backwards and say.
I cannot hear you, Yosef. There is some kind of echo. Yeah, without that. Yeah, because there is an echo that makes it. Yeah, that he shouldn't. No, because when you sit here, there is certain kind of strange echo, and I hear that. The speaker with you, and it's like I don't hear.
I'm asking a good question.
Okay.
One question is how to define the difference between the typical move and the unique move. The second question is if there's no clear distinction, so how can you know? There's a different way to look at it and say what a typical Ramdan does is basically trace back. So he does it better, he does it more closed. I exactly the word now, but he does it in a better way. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a difference.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think I will answer your question, the two questions in the same way now. When we come to see the moment that I think it is Reb Chaim in the text, yes, that's when we come there, and I then will try to explain what is the novum of this moment in terms of hermeneutics. Then, looking back, you will be able to say. But I say now, at that moment, without defining, I say that think about this text. Yeah, do you really think like if I had I given you this text without telling you who wrote it at this point? Yeah, it's changing a bit the style of the writing. Would you say this is Reb Chaim?
That's why I used my second question. Okay, maybe the text is built in a way, like you're saying, it would be easier to talk after we get to the point.
Right, yes.
Maybe the text is built in a way that it's very close. We go back and forth, but I wouldn't say it's not.
Okay. Okay.
I still, after I read the text, I still need to expose.
Yeah. Okay. So I will try to convince you. If I succeed or not, we'll see tomorrow. That's of course it's Reb Chaim in the sense that Reb Chaim knows that, and Reb Chaim follows that, but it's not Reb Chaim in the same of the thing that he tried to introduce into the hermeneutics. And I will try to convince you. I'm not like, and I will try to explain also the logic of that. But yes, I didn't do it yet. I didn't do the work. Yes, so you're right. Okay. But if, okay, so we failed again. That's the point that we are now, and that's the point that we begin today. That's we failed again in explaining, okay, so there was one point that I mentioned yesterday, and I mentioned again now, that till now, and according to me, it's not Reb Chaim yet, it's not Soloveitchik yet, it's very traditional common hermeneutics. And the next point is that's what I want you to do, and I think that's the point that I will try to show you also tomorrow, but I want you to keep in mind something, because we are not interested in the interpretation of Maimonides, but we are interested, or we definitely are not interested in Maimonides itself. We are not interested even in the interpretation of Maimonides, but we are interested in the fact that what you do when you do interpretation of a text, or Maimonides in that case. What is the thing that you do, and does it make sense to you that you do like that? Think about you now like as a person that's reflect on that, and I think that is what Soloveitchik actually does, but that will be tomorrow. But put aside for a moment Soloveitchik, just think, does it make sense to go through all of these stages in interpreting this section of Maimonides? And I think that basically that's what I tried to show yesterday, to discuss a bit, and I will not do it again now, do the continuation, that you can agree to that point or not agree, you don't agree to this point, but basically we do the same thing when we critically, historically, academically read a text. We try to trace the sources, we try to say if there is a consistency in the view of that text, we try something like that. So in contrast to Soloveitchik, you probably have, okay, you will use a manuscript in the library in order to see and to say, okay, that is not Maimonides at all. So what kind of question do you have? That will be a difference perhaps, but that is not a difference in terms of understanding what you do as an hermeneutician. What is the way of doing hermeneutics? As if you are trying to reconstruct something in these ways, and to that's what will be interesting for me, what is interesting for me with Soloveitchik later, that I use Soloveitchik, is to find the ontological, hermeneutical moment and the political meaning of that ontology. That's for tomorrow. So now, we keep the pleasure of the painful reading. I don't know how to explain it. Part of the way that I read it here is for all the people who never read Soloveitchik. It's hard to tell. I mean, this is a kind of experience, and I'm not a very sentimental person. But I don't, after when you study, I think, when you study the yeshiva, it doesn't have to be Soloveitchik, it can be other things too. But one of the greatest moments is the moment that you begin to understand the game and you begin to enjoy this game of hermeneutics. That at some point, you see it as a very creative game that you can play with text, and you learn it from them, and you play with them, and it's an amazing pleasure. for those who like it. And for those who don't like it, they become historians. Okay, so I wanted also you to understand a bit, to feel this kind of game that's let you so much, give you so many possibilities to play with a text. It's not obvious. It's a pleasure. Okay, now we go on. Again, I need someone to read, to be the reader.
Very slow.
Very slow. So someone who reads slow.
Very slow.
Read slow, please. We read from the text of Soloveitchik first. What you have, 12 on the top, and the first section, ונראה. ונראה לומר בדעת הרמב"ם.
ונראה לומר בדעת הרמב"ם, והנה בעיקר הפירוש, דעיסת הקווים,
יאוין שם.
יאוין שם בירושלמי, פרק א', דחלה. Okay,
so just stop here and see that. First, בדעת הרמב"ם, he now returns to something else. I mentioned that this Mishnah is ridiculously, for anyone who is educated, is ridiculously bad formulated, or not even bad formulated. It makes no sense to someone who was educated on Talmud after, because there is no, this Mishnah is, you don't know what it means. I mentioned that yesterday, you just repeat it. What does it mean when they eat it? They have to eat it, and then you know if you have to take halal. That it's even, for those who know halacha, it's even impossible, because the moment that you already eat it, it's the moment after all of the thing that's made, it's the time that you have to take out the challah, so you even cannot do it. So what exactly, and if it's not that, then what does it mean that they eat it? Most of them eat it, sometimes they eat it, and if sometimes they eat it, how do we know that it's now, this sometimes, and not tomorrow, this sometimes? That's with this piece of, so this formulation of the Mishnah is, from halachic, from Talmudic point of view, because the Mishnah is not, the Mishnah without the Talmud is text that's is very different text, but from Talmudic point of view is really a bad formulated or ill formulated and this outrageous this formulation. So
but
now.
Can't you say means something more general?
Yeah.
And not what you're saying, as they eat it, now
that I said it's impossible, but let's say
the word would be a different kind of present progressive than what
entirely. And I take this thing that you said and I said, okay, and now tell me when is the time that they eat from it, and then when is the time that they don't eat from it? Because these two possibilities are the Mishnah, right? So now
Schechter, it doesn't have to be a causative, as you're saying.
Yeah, but
it's not that if this is something about what we eat from.
So what is the criteria?
If in general, eat from this is a common practice.
Well, in a specific city?
No.
Well,
just general thing. If eat from
yeah.
Then Sefer Klovim is something that eat from it, then these rules on
You mean that the Mishnah didn't know the halacha? What you say is that we don't know if Isata Klavim, I can eat from it. It should be have challah or not. As if it's like a discussion in the someone come to discussion. If they, but that is not Mishnah. Mishnah is a codex of halacha. It's not like saying, okay, now let me think about it and tell you some. I mean, in Tosefta you can find things like that they will tell you, okay, this. It will be this. I think not in this way. That's tell you as if someone is just arriving to the middle and said, oh, I don't know but I don't know if they eat, then fine. If not, then that will be. But I don't know about this Isata Klavim. That's what the point they say, yes, because just check it later.
Yeah.
Yes, Judy.
We want to contribute to what you said, because I also understood it when you give it directly to your dog, it is no suspect that it is for the dog. It is directly for it. But if you prepare a dough, bake it, and leave it anyway, and then the roim was supposed to have no food available at the place where they are, then you have to think that they need the food and they will eat it. And then you have to prepare in advance the dough as though it is lechem.
Yeah.
And I think in the Psachim text, when Rabbi Meir uses the Maaser Sheni, but what does Rava? Rava uses Maaser Oni, and this is
No, it's not Maaser Oni. He speaks. Rava speaks about the. Sorry, just like Rava doesn't speak about Maaser Oni. He speaks about Lechem Oni.
Lechem Oni. Okay, but he uses another term. Okay, I understood it that Rava disagrees with Rabbi Meir and tries to bring another point.
No, not as I understand. I understand it like this way. Rava is trying to say why, in the case of matzah, what is the logic or what is the reasoning of Rabbi Meir in the case of matzah? Because we have a problem with Rav Papa, and Rav Papa make the problem, and he says Rabbi Meir doesn't make sense here in the case of matzah. And Rava says it makes sense, but you need another stage of reasoning, because the first stage of reasoning is like challah, you have to take out Maaser Sheni. Yeah, that's I study as like Rav Papa said. I study it by deduction from the text about challah, about Isa. Okay, now he says Rava. Very fine. Keep that in mind. That's what you study about challah. Yeah. Now, in the case of challah, there is this expression lechem, right, in the Bible, and in the case of matzah, you have also the expression lechem oni, lechem. Everything that you say about this thing, you have to say this thing. So actually, that's the reasoning of Rabbi Meir, as I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Now, okay. Now we have, נראה לומר בדעת הרמב"ם, והנה בעיקר הפירוש לעיסת הכלבים, and what is why he says so? We'll see immediately because he brings the Yerushalmi, of course. But I say that if you read the Mishnah, you said, I understand the Mishnah. Yeah, but that's what you said is actually a Talmudic work. You didn't do a Mishnaic work now. You exactly do. Okay, I understand it in that case, under this condition, under that. Yeah, that is Talmud. That is not Mishnah.
But how can you understand it differently?
Oh, you can understand it in many ways. I can tell you, you can understand it, for instance.
You're correct, but if you understand it not that way, then you enter into the problematic, then you have a problem.
Yeah.
And then the Mishnah becomes unclear.
Okay, so therefore the Yerushalmi takes entirely different way from what we took up to now. Up to now we had something like, and then he changes, and then the Yerushalmi changed exactly to the opposite direction. But the first move of the Yerushalmi is very different from what we did up to now. Up to now, we discussed the issue of the Isat HaKlavim because I made it because the Roim doesn't like to eat from that, but nothing specific about this dough, right? We didn't say anything about this dough. Perhaps someone yesterday mentioned something, but basically we didn't pay attention to if there is something like Isat HaKlavim, and we want to say something about that, what kind of an object it is that we are speaking about. Is it the same object like every dough? And that is the Yerushalmi. So skip now because we want to see the Yerushalmi, because Chaim just quote half a sentence. So we have it on page 2 of the sources, Yerushalmi. Yeah?
Want me to read from Yerushalmi?
Yes, please.
איזה כניסת כלבים, רבי שמעון בן לקיש, אמר כל שעירב במורסן.
Okay, so let me tell you what is Mursan. Oh, I don't know what is Mursan. I know what people say is what is Mursan. Mursan is a certain kind of addition. You have, when you clean the wheat, you have many stages of cleaning, right? And the first thing is that you have the wheat with the peel and yeah, all kind, but different kinds because they are. They really knew what is baking, so you see all kind of expression in our make. That I have no clue because I never baked, and I never went to, you know. I'm a very civilized person, not primitive. So
all the hipsters are baking their own bread.
yeah,
Perhaps time to read.
yeah, but when the hipster will be something that I call civilized, that will be the day. Okay. So, so if you, what is Isat HaKlavim? So Rish Lakish, yeah, Rish Lakish is one, we have the Yerushalmi, just for those who don't know, Yerushalmi, the first and perhaps the most important Amoraim, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So they ask, what is the meaning of Isat HaKlavim? And the answer of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Kol she'irev b'musa, right? Now, what is the point? In contrast to what we have done up to now, that we specify something about this Isa, right? And then, I mean, this is a specific kind of Isa. There are Isa that's probably only dog. That's the question. What? Because remember, the problem with this Mishnah, if you specify it for an object, is that then you have to explain, but then why in other cases it's okay? I mean, when you have to distinguish, say, okay, so if the issue is that it's specific material, then why the same specific material if the Roim eats from that? When it's still the problem, but it goes, I think this problem will cause the Yerushalmi to fall on itself and to change direction behind the scene. But okay, let's read for.
But we say that Musan has actually nothing to do with dogs. That we know. We can agree on that.
On what? On it doesn't have to do with dogs?
Nothing to do with dogs.
No, it just has to do with the fact that humans don't like to eat it, yeah?
Don't like it?
Humans don't like to eat it. I mean, also the hipsters in my neighborhood in Neukölln, next to the temple of Afel, also they pretend they eat Mursan. They basically eat white bread with additions of Mursan, right? They try to eat Mursan, try to eat, you know what, perhaps those who eat bio and vegan and so they are really eating, but that I'm not sure they are humans. But the other issue is...
We don't know what's Mursan or we do know?
We know what Mursan is. I mean, I said I don't know what Mursan, but there is a whole tradition of explaining it, which makes sense. Like I think it's one of the most, the strongest part that we don't eat. I mean, there are several. Later, there is the issue of lotetim that you put it in water, and that's make another kind of cleaning of the wheat But that is something else. It's not Mursan. I don't know exactly what they take out, but you make solet or something like that. The first thing I think is Mursan. This is the most. This is something that we really don't like to eat. Okay, so.
מנהיגה אמר בזמן שהגויים אוכלים ממנה. פעמים שאין הרים אוכלים ממנה?
Yeah, so that is. Anyone wants to try to explain Yerushalmi, or I will?
I think it's just the same path we took. I mean, it's folklore.
It's what?
It's like whole wheat or something very substantial.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore not everyone can eat it. It's someone who has labor, who works physically.
Yeah, I think like it's actually explanation of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. That is the way, it's a very, what we read, I mean, the Yerushalmi is written a bit differently in terms of, we have Rish Lakish, yeah, with Mursan. And now the Yerushalmi or Rish Lakish itself, that's they quote him, try to explain where he comes to this conclusion from. Why he think that it's Mursan. And either Yerushalmi or Rish Lakish says now Matnita Amra Bizman Sharoim Ochlim Mimena. The Mishnah said Bizman Sharoim Ochlim Mimena. You have to understand that from the fact that that it's not the case that always the roim will eat from that. Only in certain cases they will eat from. So now what is this case of that something? Some people will say, I'm not going to touch it. You can kill me. And some people will say, okay, I don't have anything to eat, I will eat it. And they say, if you take bread and add to that musan, wheat and add to that musan, with the musan, then that will be a liminal case that you cannot really say if people will or will not. Some people will say, I will never touch it. And some people say, okay. And in that case, because it is this kind of thing, which is not clear if it's like human food or not human food, if it's food that only dogs will be, dogs eat everything. Yeah, sometimes it's a problem, and human don't eat everything. So there are things that some human says I don't eat it because it's non-human, and some people will say, yeah, it's non-human, but I'm a hipster. No. So that is the logic that Rish Lakish, according to the Yerushalmi, finds in the Mishnah. Okay? That there is a certain kind of material that is hard to tell if human will. You never know. Sometimes they will, sometimes they will not. And this material is Musan. So actually, what he says about now, what is the interpretation now of Bizman Sharoim Uchlim or Bizman Sharoim Eno Roim Uchlim? The interpretation is that Bizman Sharoim Uchlim, it's a very specific point. It's quite an interesting argument of the Yerushalmi. Bizman Sharoim Uchlim, even on this side, you have to take into account that there is a possibility that people will not eat from that. If you have such kind of food, then this is the thing that you have to take challah from. If this kind of food that's perhaps yes, perhaps not, some people will, some people not, then you can. So the Bizman Sharoim Ochlim, it's not a criteria for decision. Yes, now when they eat, yes. Now when they don't eat, no. It's the very kind of this disagreement, of this knowledge that you don't know, that makes it possible to be considered for halal.
So what's the relationship between the two sentences?
Which one?
And the next one.
Again. Kol shirev b'musan.
Right.
Yeah. So, and now we say, why do you know?
Shaki says the definition is whether or not there is a musan.
And then the reasoning. The reasoning, how did he come to this conclusion?
Isn't it an attack? Like it's not up to the content of the code, but about the times that the shepherds eat or not eat?
No, that's exactly what he does with the Mishnah brilliantly in a way. We understand that Bizman Sharoim Ochlim, under this condition, or in the time that I will do that. Bizman Sharoim Ochlim, I will do that, right? So somehow I have to see if they will eat, if they will not, and so on. But he comes to the point that says, Bizman Sharoim Ochlim Mimena, yeah? And he analyzed only this part of the text of the Mishnah, Rish Lakish. And he says, what is this thing that I say about it, Bizman Sharoim Ochlim Mimena? Is something that sometimes they don't eat from that. Just 1 second. And if you have something like that, that's basically that. And he says, what kind of thing it is? He says, let's put it to the object. What kind of thing it is that sometimes someone will eat from it, someone will. He says that is musan. And from that, he concludes that this is musan. So he takes this double Bizman Sharoim, Bizman Sharoim to show you what kind of an object it is. And he says that is musan because sometimes people say, I don't touch it, sometimes, yeah.
But in saying so, it seems like it's being distilled to an issue of like personal preference. Is that reading? Like if you like sprouted wheat bread or if you don't like sprouted wheat bread, like that's what
No, the point is that if I think, yeah, it's personal preference, but the point that he's doing is not a personal, I mean, he begins with the personal preference, says, if there are personal people who says, no way, this is not human food, and if there are people who says, yes, this I will eat nevertheless, if this is like this kind of thing, and there are kind of things like that, like Mursan, then you take challah out of it. But if it is something like you say, no way, no one will eat from it, then not.
Right.
So he looks for something that's in the case of personal preference, it still has to get matzah. But the personal,
I guess I was just questioning whether or not like the ambivalence of the dough itself is determined by some personal preference, or if it's sort of like I'm just wondering because is this non being understood as when there's like zera that like now we must eat this bread because there's not enough food otherwise we can afford it, or it's completely always across all time and space.
Yes.
A matter of personal preference for the road.
That's I mean, what you say now can also be is a possible interpretation, another possible interpretation of the Mishnah in general, to say, yes, in normal case, I check if the ro'im ochlim, and here is the case that everyone will eat from it because that's our problem. I have to take challah or not, so we eat from that, right? But I eat from that just because I don't have anything else. But what if I had anything else? And he says, okay, if you had anything else, you have to check if the ro'im ochlim or not. So there is no shortage of food, but still the shepherds are very, John Wayne type. They eat anything. Okay. So now let's go on.
Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Kol she'asa kakin b'tane ken asa'an kakin chayaret asa'al limutin tura.
Okay.
What is kakin?
Yeah, God knows. Again, this is I can tell you, but I can tell you because I can look on Justro the same as you can. This is not like it's like what we from that the modern I think Hebrew word term. The modern Hebrew word of ka'ach, ke'achim comes from that. Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything because they just took the word without knowing anything and gave it this meaning. Limudim we know better because limudim you can see several times that it means something which is cut. So probably kachin means something like it's not like a piece. Yeah, so that sounds like something like. Brötchen or something like that, yeah?
Okay.
Limudim is something that's is cut really.
So you cut it maybe with
you do with pasta.
Yeah, and the other one, maybe it's like.
And kachim probably it's in there, so it's probably just a bowl of something or like something that's not like, but not really a loaf, that's the point. But something just like you take. Because if it's loaf, then clearly it is. It is. So something like it's not exactly. You don't know if it's exactly bread or not, but it's you can eat it like a bletchen, yeah.
But it is not characterized due to its contents, but only to its form.
Yeah.
So it is bread.
It is bread, but not bread. That's the point. That's Rabbi Yochanan. He says bread is not only, pasta is bread? No. Now, what's the difference between pasta and...
There's no...
There is. There is yeast, of course there is.
Yes, exactly.
So, okay, not why? Pasta, you make dough. No?
Pasta doesn't go up. It is dry.
Does it raise at all? Okay, so think about something else that's raised. I don't know. That will be another question if it's being cooked, because bagel, for instance, that's bagel does raise and then you cook it, right?
When Yochanan talks about
It could be toasted.
I can tell you what if. That's what I think. That was the, and I think she right, because if we look at the limudim, then the other. So limudim is not pasta. I thought that, but it's something. Okay, that is my pasta. Think about my pasta for a second. That is something that's raised, and then you lower it again, and then you cut it into small pieces, and then you do whatever you bake it. Okay.
But we're not sure that we're all talking about bake. If we bake, boiled, there's many ways to process it.
Absolutely. So, and actually, lechem can be, according to, I'm just telling you from like a very knowledgeable person about bread, that lechem, halachically, can only be baked. If it's cooked, it's not lechem. But according to the.
Obviously,
but forget about pasta. Think, for instance, about this, how do you call this? This stick, bagel sticks. Grissini, yeah. Or that. That's, can tell you, halachically, it's not, that is, I think, something like, if you look for something like limudim, is something like that. Because that is something that's, halachically, you don't, it's not considered lechem for the way that you bless on that and all of these things. And the other thing is something like, look more like, I don't know, pretzel, this pretzel bretchen. Perhaps that will be, I mean, I can tell you what they say, but I think those who say the thing about it knows exactly what we do, because there is no really a lot of, we have to decide. The logic of that is that you have something which is more like a small pieces which cannot be considered bread and something that can. Okay. So that's, but the point, I think Judith is right. The point was like the way that it's the form of that. It's not like the mousin. It's like just the form of the product. And now we come to the last view.
Rabbi B'Shem Shmuel, Rabbi Ivi B'Shem Rabbi Chia, Rava, Afilu Asa'an
Kluskin. Now that's, I can tell you what, because that's a word that comes a lot, not in this form of the Yerushalmi, but gluskaot, etc., etc. This is real bread. So he says, now we come to the point of, again, so he says, he says that even if it is like a real piece of bread, it still can be a real piece of bread, which is a good bread. Kluska is a really good bread. Even if that can be sata klavim. So how? Why? Yeah, he is entirely taking the other direction. No, there is no musan. He says gluska is a really good bread. It's a piece of bread that you put. Yeah.
No, but here he doesn't say that. We just know it.
You know it, yeah. But no, but gluskin, that's in contrast to the keachim, and so that's, we mostly have to say gluska. It's a common word. It's not like a word that we don't know entirely.
Yeah, but we don't. I mean, you can't be sure that you can make a gluska.
You can, but then it will not be gluska.
Why?
Because gluska is a good bread. That is the way that it's used already, the term. I mean, of course, it can be Yerushalmi that's use it in different meaning, but normally, if you use the term gluska, it's like.
It's always a very good bread.
I think so. Yeah, it's like.
Yes, I think it's a bread from white flour.
Yes, it's a bread of white flour, and it's like as the Yerushalmi or other places we call it. Gluskain or social of Solomon. That's what Solomon the king was putting on his table.
Yeah, but I think that because the context here is like the portions and the forms, I thought gluska would be just above.
Yeah, but look what he says. He said afilu. He says no. Forget about
afilu in terms of form.
Afilu in terms of the form of gluska.
Of a real bread.
Okay, maybe. I mean, it's a possible. But I mean, it's possible that's what he says, but it's not possible that that was the Yerushalmi's thing. Because look at the next sentence, if you read. Yeah, so we saw, I mean, if you say that it's Kloskin, we saw that the Roim, that there is a case that the Roim will, even the Roim will say, no, I don't touch that thing.
Because I'm still with the Musan.
Okay.
But then that's fine, and but then the answer will not work. What will the answer? Yeah. The only thing, the point is that you made it in order, but if the point of the Yerushalmi, I don't say that you're not right. I mean, it's possible interpretation, I think, to think that he speak about, but the Yerushalmi at least, this answer will not work now because you just say, then it's made of more sin. That's what you had to answer. Right?
Yeah.
It's Gluska. But yeah, but the answer of the Yerushalmi is that, which is again taking it out of the question of object, out of the question, it's going to say, if you made that thing that a food that only dogs will eat, and not
basically say that from the first place.
So the question is, what was? Sorry, for a second. Elchanan, what did you leave here? In the air. If from the first, he explained the Mishnah by the intention of the person who does it. If you did a thing, even if the best bread in the world, but he said, like I do sometimes, yeah, I cook for him something which is better than what I do for myself. But I said, okay, but I do it for him, not for me. So in that case, I don't have to take challah out of it, or etc. Okay, so now let's see what Soloveitchik does with this Yerushalmi. Yeah, so let's go back. Now we read again from the beginning of where you read in Soloveitchik.
ונראה, ומה בדעת האדם, והנה בעיקר פירוש תפיסת הכתבים,
יעוין שם
בירושלמי, פרק א' ושלב, איזה גליסת הכתבים, ריש לקיש, אמר כל שירד במוסים, וכולי, רבי
יוחנן,
אמר כל שעשה הכתבים, וכולי, רבי בשם שמואל, רבי...
רב מדר, בשם רבי חייא רובה.
רובה אפילו שעשה מספין, והשמינה אם אין הרבים אוכלים ממנה, תיפטר שעשה משעה ראשונה שלא יאכלו הרבים ממנה.
עד כאן. That is the quote. And now let's see what Soloveitchik conclude from that.
והיינו דפליגי בפירושה, דמניתים בעיסת הכלבים בזמן שאין הרבים אוכלים ממנה. ריש לקיש ורבי סבא, דהיינו שעצם העיסה עשויה באופן שהיא רק לאכילת כלבים.
Okay, so he, by the way, understands Rabbi Yochanan differently from what I explained, because he says that the way that the object of the Isa, of the door, is somehow, I don't know what he means exactly. Yeah, Rish Lakish, I know, Rabbi Yochanan, no, but it doesn't matter. That is, he says, okay, keep.
ורבי בר סובר דאף איסה כראוי אם אף עשה בתחילה על דעת אף שלא יאכלו ממנה רק כלבים, הרי היא בכלל איסת כלבים מבוארת במשנה.
Okay, so at the first moment we look at this Yerushalmi and we think the first, what we did, yeah, I was saying, someone says, he says that's both Rish Lakish, and you can stick to Rish Lakish. Someone says that it's the object of the Isa, and someone says it's the question of what you meant in your mind, what you had in your mind when you prepared it, for what, for what sake, for whom, etc. Okay, והנה ברמב"ם,
והנה ברמב"ם בפרק ו'
להלכות.
בהלכות ביכורים.
זה לשונו. הלכה ח' זה לשונו. Let's look at the Rambam. Okay, let's go to the sources page. And now the page 2, Rambam, Bikurim.
No, it's right after the Yerushalmi.
Yes.
Okay. עושה עיסה להכניע לפג שלה לבהמה ולחיה פטורה. עיסת הכלבים בזמן שהרגים אוכלים ממנה חייבת לחלה. עיסת העקום פטורה.
Yes. And now, so that is the Rambam. Now let's look, because he's quoting, so I brought it in longer. Let's look at the Kesef Mishnah, this interpret how we understand. This is one of the commentary on the Mishnah Torah, how he explained the Rambam here about challah. This is not about matzah, this is about challah. Okay, so now the Kesef Mishnah.
העושה עיסה וכולי, ספרי זוטה והעליף בה מדכתיב אריסותיכם.
Yes, so he goes exactly like Rash Mishan's, yeah, without saying it, but that is exactly the same thing, yeah. Okay, עיסת הכלבים.
עיסת הכלבים וכולי, משנה פרק תמה וחלה.
Yeah, that we saw this Mishnah, of course we discussed it, the Mishnah of Chala.
בירושלמי.
And that's the Yerushalmi that we saw now. Yeah. In Yerushalmi, they disagreed. Yes, they have this machlokas. כמאן דאמר. Okay. What?
Because it said kama hu is not meaning the portion.
No. That is just for just like a typo. Mahi עיסת הכלבים. לא כמה היא, מהי.
Mahi?
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice typo, but it's מהי. ונראה מדברי רבנו שפסק, now if you look, רבנו it's the Maimonides, yeah? So if you look at Maimonides, at what you read about that's Maimonides, that he actually said, like Rabbi Bo, אפילו עשה גלוסקרים. Now, how does he conclude from that that's Maimonides think like that? Look at Maimonides. Can you bring any name it?
Telos, for doing something for the purpose of.
I think it's something, yeah. I will say Saleh here, and okay, yeah, he has a different conclusion, but I think like he, at least we have to take that he thinks why, because first, why at all I mean, yeah, it's like why to think that's he think that it's like according to Rabbi Bo, we can read and see if it makes sense. Okay, let's read. Let's read. והתנינן.
בזמן, ואם אין רבים לוקחים ממנה, תפתח שהעשאה היא שעה ראשונה שלא יאכלו הרבים ממנה, ואם כן אפילו...
That was Rabbi Bo, in the Yerushalmi, and then he adds that.
ואם כן אפילו עשאה כמטרתו של שלמה,
ואין בה שום בריאות ולא שינוי ולא היכר מאחר שההצעה משעה ראשונה שלא יאכלו ממנה שכתב לעיל בסמוך על זה יישא בהמה ולחיה פטורה. וכתב התמן שאין חייבת, אלא יישא שסופה להפוך לחם למאכל אדם מפני שעיסת הכלבים, דרך הרועים לפעמים לאכול ממנה, כלומר שדרך אותם רואים לאכול מאותה עיסה, או שאף
על דרך
כן נקרא לחם עשוי למאכל אדם וחיה.
Okay. Now the point is, I think, yeah, he says, look at, I mean, a bit elaborated discussion of Elad's point, but if you see the whole point of the Maimonides that he mentioned is just why do you, the intention of doing it. He never mentioned anything else. Here and later, and then you have to also understand the Isat HaRoim according to that principle. And the Isat HaRoim, because the principle is that you do it for the Isat HaRoim, it's something that you can make something for sake of human eating, and then it will be considered still as human food. But that is the only point, and therefore he thinks that Maimonides actually agrees with Rabbi Bo. So that's now that's Soloveitchik. Now let's see Soloveitchik how he plays with that. So he goes with the Rambam, and now it goes with Shami, and now he says. הלכה ח' שזה לשונו.
העושה עיסה להטיל הבת שלו לבהמה ולחיה פטורה. עיסת הכלבים בזמן שהורגים אותו ממנה חייבת בחלה
וחייב במצה עד כאן בחלה עד כאן לשונו. ועיין בכסף משנה, that's the text that we just saw.
שם שדקדק והרמב"ם פסק כרבי בעל השם שמואל בירושלמי, דאב עיסה גבורה כל שעשאה על דרך שלא יאכל ממנה רק כלבים פטורה.
Okay, so that's up to now. It's just what we all the texts that we quoted, and he just organized them accordingly and says, okay, Maimonides should be like. If you can follow, you can say that Maimonides is like Yerushalmi, like Rabbi Bo, like the Kesef Mishnah interpretation, namely that it's only the intention of that, and that is the principle of Isat HaKlavim, the question of the intention, right? Okay, now what is going to do with that thing? Now he wants to do something with that thing.
הרי לכל יסוד הדין של עיסת הכלבים והפקעת דין חיות חלב שלה הוא רק משום מחשבתו שחשב עליה שלא להאכילה לאדם.
Okay, so he says, if we follow this logic up to now, and we say, what did Maimonides, what are the commitments that Maimonides' text is committed to? He says he committed to the principle of intention, not to the principle. That is the only thing that I can bring up to now today, according to this certain genealogy that he did of the text, from the Mishnah to the Yerushalmi to the Kesef Mishnah. I mean, according to the Kesef Mishnah. Okay, so if that is, and you can see it in different texts of Maimonides. It's not only in one text, in a different text. So the only thing that's about Isat HaKlavim is and Chala is only because of the intention. That is, what did you think? And he doesn't say intention, which is interesting. And let me say his word, perhaps we'll see if he means intention. But he said, מחשבתו שחשב עליה שלא להאכילה לאדם. Only the way that he thought what he did. He doesn't speak about intention. I mean, he could have said what is kavanato. He doesn't use this word. He says, חשב בזמן הכנתה. Okay. I would just translate when you read it, even to those inach, to those Amorai, this rabbis in the Yerushalmi. So even to those, let's say, Rish Lakish that says Mosin, right? Even Rish Lakish that says, just listen to claim, even Rish Lakish, that's we distinguish, says he thinks that the question is the question of the object, right? So let's keep reading. If even that's claimed, you will now twist it.
משום שחישב עליה שלא להכריע לאדם. ורק
the Svirale, that he thought, his view was like that.
The Svirale, the Ba'inan, Masea, מוכיחים עליה. באמת אף אם ירד במוסין, והסעה הלימודים גם כן
Chazia, it's okay, so let me Chazia, it's Raui, but how to translate it? Suitable, yeah. Okay, so let me just repeat the point. He says, now he makes the twist of the interpretation of the Yerushalmi, which is like not very, I mean, if it's the Yerushalmi or not, it doesn't matter, but I mean, it's not something very unique to put this into question. He's like, we can interpret, because we saw that the Yerushalmi is really wild, because it begins with the question of the object, it ends with something which has nothing to do with the object at all. It's only the intention or the way that you think about it. So how do you put these things together? I mean, they sit together in the same thing, and then, so he interprets it like that. Everyone thinks that the question is the question of intention. That's the point of if you do challah for someone, if you do a door for someone and you have to take challah, is if you do it for the sake of a human. And if you don't do it for the sake of the human, you don't have to do challah. Now, so why do you have Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish that says Musin? What does he think? He says, even he agreed to the principle. What he thinks, and that is a thing that's very common in the Talmud, or in the Talmudic discussion, more of in the case of, you have it several times, that's in order to make your thought, to be committed to something that you think, you have to do something which expresses it. Yeah? So how do you express the fact that you do it for a dog? In the world, you add more sin, that is the way, but it's not because the real reason. Also, Rish Lakish agreed that the point is the intention. Just the question how if intention has to be expressed in the way that you act, or expression doesn't have to have. That is the disagreement. How do you know about someone's intention? Yeah.
But it also seems to me there's some extent to which Rabim is being collapsed with a person who's faking, and I feel like those can be two different people in this case. So I just wonder, like, so this idea of the person who's intending when faking it for it to be for the Klavim as opposed to people, it doesn't really matter when it comes to whether or not the Rabim themselves are going to have the object in front of them as a teacher.
Yeah,
that's why I think there's a conflict. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you mean you don't really need the Rohim at all in the story? I mean,
I guess, yeah. So
okay.
So then
if I understand you well, then this is an important point, because I think what you do, it's again this problem that I mentioned. I mean, I didn't mention this problem, but one of the problems that you have with this Mishnah is like, at what point do you check the intention of the person? You have to, and the point here is that if at the point of doing and we'll see that again in a moment, but if at the point of making the Isa, the door, that is the moment, the decisive moment. And it makes sense because we'll see that you don't take challah from something. I mean, the challah has a moment. Yeah. Okay, these dogs appear quite a few times in the halacha. And for instance, the thing that is something which is not considered to be at all food is called shelo raui lemachal kelev. When it's not even, I mean, something that dog doesn't eat is not food at all. I mean, it's not food. And it makes sense because indeed dogs eat everything, right? So, but there are different ways. And so in terms of halacha here, it's not different, but the metaphors are very different, or the use of the term dogs instead of animal and so on. It's an interesting thing, but not for our discussion. Okay, so after we failed last time, now he began a new thing, which in a second we will see where he is. In a moment we'll see where he's leading us, how to re-explain Maimonides. But he begins with this question of what is Isat HaKlavim, and open this question and try to follow the Yerushalmi. And then the more he follows the Yerushalmi, the more he comes to the point where actually the only thing that you have in Isat HaKlavim is the kind of intention. Yeah, that's the whole thing up to now was leading us to. So he made several stages in order to come to the idea that we have to take this into account when we explain Maimonides. And actually, according to the Kesef Mishnah that he integrates in, that is the only thing that is important for Isat HaKlavim. Yeah, that was the view that we saw in the Kesef Mishnah that he quotes in explaining Maimonides and the Yerushalmi. And then he takes the Yerushalmi and says, the whole Yerushalmi is, everyone agrees that this is the point. The only question is how some, like Rish Lakish, thinks that in order for some to intend something, you have to express it in a certain way, and the other don't think that you have to express it. Rabbi Shmuel Bar doesn't think that you have to express it at all, you just have to intend. But the question, also the whole Yerushalmi is the question of intention, or what you had on mind, which is not exactly intention. So then he brings, and now I will just read this. It's where we ended, and he brings once half sentence, which is a very, I think, quite a strong argument, because he says, "Ukidetnan," after the whole thing of the Yerushalmi and his interpretation that you read, he says, "Ukidetnan demitamaatu matochlin." Yeah. Now, what is the Mishnah says, and that is an interesting thing, that apart from everything about the intention or not klavim and so on and so forth, one thing for sure, Isat HaKlavim, that's the door, this dog's door, is under the category of tum'ah. Now, tum'ah is only food, only what is only things that human eat can have tum'ah. So the Mishnah, in a way, addition thing, it says, of course, and he says, if that is the principle, then of course it is food, and of course the only thing is the question of intention. Because nevertheless, someone can eat it. So anything that can be eaten by human, or supposedly can be eaten by human, can get tum'ah, can be under this category of tum'ah. And therefore, it says, anyway, according to the Mishnah, this must be food that this human can eat. So it cannot, this is the assumption of the whole thing. If you follow this logic of the Mishnah, and if the Mishnah is consistent in some way. But, so that was and now he tries to bring a problem, create a problematics that if we follow the problematics, we see that perhaps we will be able to explain what the Rambam, why the Rambam added this thing. No, so if you want to give Asher Lefi Zeh, that is about the middle of the. גם כן, כדתנן במתמת אומר, אשר לפי זה צריך עיון. Did you find?
אשר לפי זה צריך עיון בחזר. בחזר וחשב עליה למאחר, אדם, אם נאמר בזה נשלם דין לחם שבה, וחזרת להיות חייבת בחלב. ונכלל זאת בהתנן, בזמן שהרדים אוכלים ממנה חייבת בחלב, והאדם יוצא בה
ידי חובתו
בפסח. או וכבר היא נתקעת לעולם מדין לחם שבת.
Okay, so what is the problematic that he brings, and he will try to connect it to the problem of the Rambam. What do you think? How do let me translate, and you can try to tell what is the problematic translation. Okay, so according to what I have told you up to now, we have to investigate, we have to think, we have to consider just one second. What will be the case? What will be the situation if this Isat Haroim, that's this thing that he thought about it for the dogs, and now we think about it. I thought about it as a dog, but now I change my mind, right? Because everything is dependent of what I think, so I can change my mind. So what will be the case there? Would we say? And I think now I want it for humans, not only for dogs. So would we say that Nishlam din lechem sheba, now it is bread as it should be, and I have to take the portion of challah from it, and I can use it as matzah on Passover, or I have to, or it's impossible to reinitiate this process. What would you say? Or that it's impossible to revive this process and to say, okay, I thought about it and now I think back. No, you cannot take your original thought.
So it's a question of temporality again. Was it the moment of the baking that designates it, and the intentionality during the baking process that designates it?
Yes, and he says,
or is it something about the object itself and how it's treated in its already baked form? That still leaves it. That still like opens.
Right.
Well, I think what our client was suggesting is that even if the Rambam, without a question, subscribes to the belief that it's the intentionality that is determinative, even so, is that you might think that that intentionality is reversible, right? So maybe even if it's completely intentional, or somehow intentionality isn't bi-directional and not.
Yeah, and there are sugiyot in the Talmud and so about thinking that, I mean, it's a serious, if you think about it, it's a serious problem because we still, this Mishnah is so undefined that we, also this question, like what to do with when the intentionality has to be. And what will be if I had the intention and then I change my mind? Why not? I can change my mind. It's not like an impossible situation, right? So if the only thing in intention here, then how could what will I do now with the situation of changing my mind after and so on? Is it possible? Because the Mishnah, the only thing was intentionality, according to this reading that we've done in this round of the reading. Okay, so let's try to see what if it's, I was looking for the word and the reversibility. So let's read and see what he's doing.
חיבה לאדם חוזר להיות בדין לחם, וגם הקמינה הבריאותה, מה שאינה עומדת באכילת לחם, כיוון דעכשיו היא הקרנה באכילת אדם, והוא לחם גמור, וגם מפרש המשנה, בזמן שאין הרבים נוספים ממנה פטורה מהאכלה, ואין אדם יוצא בה בידי חובתו בפסח, והוא זה לעולם, ולא מהניע מה שחשב אחר כך אכילת אדם.
Okay, so he brings in the Rambam. The Rambam also wrote in his early days when he was very young. He wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, which is a very important commentary. And if you look, if you look on page 2 from the sources, the last one is Rambam Perush HaMishnayot. So Isat HaKlavim, that's the Rambam Perush on Tractate Chala. That's we read the Mishnah, right? The list of the thing. The first thing that we quote. So now he goes to this Perush.
Isat HaKlavim הוא שלישין אותה בגמור סנה, ודומה לו להתכוון לאכילה לכלבים או זבולתם ממיני החיות ושלא יאכל ממנה שום אדם. אינה חייבת אכלה, למאמר
איפה? אינה חייבת אכלה למאמר השם יתברך.
השם יתברך, ואכלתם מלחם הארץ. ואין עושים בה עירובי תחתונים ולא שטפי צבאות, לפי שאלו האירובים אינן נעשים אלא מדברים שהכוונה בהם שיכולון תעלינה כמו שהתבאר באירובים, כי זהו כוונת העירוב, וכמו כן אין מברכים עליה ואין מדברים עליה, לפי שאין כמו הקניות. אינה נעשית ביום טוב, למה שאמר השם יתברך
ביום טוב,
הוא לבדו יעשה לכם, ואמר לכם ולא לפניכם.
Now listen, and that's now page 3. Now listen to this thing that he takes from as very informative as to what is the view of Maimonides. So.
ואין אדם יצא בידי חובתו בפסח, וכפי שאין אדם יצא ידי חובתו, אלא בדבר שחייב אכלה, כמו שביארנו במה...
Okay, so let's first stop here. What do you see here as essential? I mean, see here, what happens here? The Maimonides interpret here the Mishnah, specifically. And he goes first to explain you about Chala and explain you what's going on, and then he goes to the En Yotzeba, that's in the Mishnah, yeah? And Mishnah in the Chala, that we saw, this list. En Adam Yotzeba Yedei Chovato Pesach. And how he explained that? He says, לפי שאין אדם יוצא ידי חובתו אלא בדבר שחייב בחלה, כמו שבארנו. So, the whole thing of Meshumeret doesn't exist here. In the Mishnah, not only that doesn't exist, on the specific case that you have to explain the matzah, he explained chala. He says you have to see that from the case of chala, right? So we are now going. So how can you put together? Okay, but now let me say another point. It's Perush HaMishnayot. The Rambam doesn't have to be consistent between Perush HaMishnayot and his Yad Chazaka. Because that he was written much later when he was like, that he was written when he was not the Rambam. That was a text. Yad Chazaka is the Rambam. And anyway, any author can change his mind, but it's really like it's not comparable. But still, you can sometimes see things that so it's not like if the Rambam says here something like that and Yad Chazaka something like that, then you can say he changed his mind. And you can look for a reason for that, or you just say, I don't know the reason, but Or you can try to find a reason why these two texts goes together, but it's not like no one would consider it a contradiction in contrast to the Yad Chazaka. If the Rambam says on the one place something like that, the other place the Yad Chazaka something like that, this is a contradiction in text that he saw as one text that should be consistent, according to him. He is not committed to be consistent between these two texts. Still, it's an interesting point that if the Rambam on the Mishnayot, in the way that he interprets the case of Matzah, the case of Pesach and Matzah, he gives the challah as the reason and doesn't have any problem with that. Whereas the whole thing that we read is that the whole problem, the whole issue of the Mishneh Torah that we read is the problem of the Matzah and Mishumeret. Okay, let's keep reading. Yeah?
What you just said is a general law and and later on it's obvious for the time as well.
No, it's obvious for it's for Reb Chaim. It's more obvious than to me. I mean, I think like everyone who for Lamdan like the Reb Chaim, he would say yes. Then Maimonides changed his mind, and he could have reasons for that. Sometimes he would say, no, he has now a new svara. But it's not like a strong contradiction. It's raised you have to look at it, you have to remember it, you have to try to explain it, but it's not like something, okay, there is a real contradiction here. Yeah, I think every...
The logical rule is a more standard rule.
Yeah, I think so. I would say that the Yad Chazaka is a consistent work, Perush HaMishnayot is something else. אוקיי, ואין יצא בידי חובתו בפסח שאין אדם יצא בחובתו, אלא בדבר שחייב בחלה, כמו שבאר, במשק הדם. אוקיי, keep going.
ואם חשב בעת הלישה בין על אכילת הכלבים ובין על אכילת בני אדם, מתחייבה אותה טיסה במה שהיה חייבת כל טיסה ואין הפרש ביניהם.
אוקיי, now he brings again something that makes sense more what Chaim says about the importance of what you have in mind and the intention. Yeah, the kind, because what he says here is like if you think, yeah, the only difference if you think at the time of the Lisha about that it will be either klavim or nadam, yeah, then it has to take challah. That is the case that's Maimonides explains. So the main question is the question of intention. That still remains both cases. Okay, so he brought that, and now we have the text of Yad Chazaka, which we have this Isa, Isat HaKlavim, בזמן שהרועים אוכלים טק, בזמן שאין הרועים אוכלים טק. מפני שאין זו משומרת לשם מצה, which we don't know what to do with that. And now we have the פירוש המשניות that it doesn't mention that at all, and the whole thing is just intention. There is nothing else. Okay, let's see what he's doing now. No, let's go back to Reb Chaim. Yeah, sorry.
No.
Okay, I will read the last sentences that we read there because I don't want to repeat. נראה דעת הרמב"ם היא שכל חזר וחשב עליה אחר כך נפלה האדם חוזר להיות בדין לחם, וגם פקע ממנה הגריותא מה שאינה אומרת, כיוון דמעכשיו, מי הקיימת לאכילת אדם והווה לך גמור. And now he says, וגם מפרש לה המשנה, so first he says, I think that the Rambam says that if you repeat, if you change your mind, then it is lechem. Why does he say so? I think it's quite clear from what we discussed before, because the only question is the question of intention, and there is no reason why I should not be able to change my mind. There is nothing added in the Maimonides text that should make you think that if you change my mind, that you cannot do it. I mean, that's only this thought that you said, I don't know exactly even when. That's the only reason. And now he says, וגם מפרש לה המשנה, בזמן שאין הרואים אוכלים מן הפטורה מן החלה, ואין אדם יוצא בידי חובתו בפסח, דהוא זה לעולם, ולא מהניה מה שחשב אחר כך לאכילת אדם. Now, he thinks that Maimonides understand the Mishnah, that yes, if you thought about it, it comes back to be lechem, but the fact that it comes to be lechem, again, doesn't mean that you can use it for matzah. He holds both things. He cuts the two issues. We say, we at the moment thought, we first thought, okay, if he tries to introduce a new twist in our thought, we thought, if we say that in case that we think about it, then it's okay, then it means that it becomes lechem, and then therefore it becomes matzah afterwards, or therefore you have to take challah out of it, right? But he thinks that, so you can do it. But he says no. You see for Maimonides that there is no problem with the fact that it becomes lechem, because you can change your mind, and when you change your mind, there is no reason why something will not be lechem. But still, I can say, even if that's the case, that this is the way that Maimonides understands the Mishnah, that's changing your mind, changing the status of it into lechem, into bread, still, the question if you can use it as matzah, although it's bread now, the question if you can use it as matzah is still not resolved. To the contrary, he thinks that Maimonides doesn't do any distinction. He thinks, you thought about it, that it will not be matzah again. The fact that, but it is lechem. It was not lechem, now it's lechem, and it's still not matzah. Or you thought about it, you change your mind, you have to take, you thought about it for kelev, you didn't have to take challah. Now you change your mind, it became bread, or it became isaf for challah, and you don't have to take challah. Why? That is what he's trying to analyze. This is already, I mean, this is not Chaim, but this is already like a more subtle discussion. It says, don't connect everything together. The logic is much more complicated. You can still think, on the one hand, that the text is committed to that and not committed to that. And I will explain you why. I mean, it's not a problem for me to explain you very well why. And that's what he will explain now. Why? How does it make sense? Such a strange view. Yeah.
בחלל הטעם פשוט, והכל הולך בתרשעת חיובה. ודתנן הקדישת עד שלא גלגלה, וגלגלה הגזבר. ואחר כך הדעת פטורה, שבשעת חובתה הייתה פטורה.
Yeah. Okay, let me tell you what it says. Okay. He says, in the case of challah, it's very simple. If you, let me explain what is the case in that the Mishnah talks about. You have someone who actually represents, the Gizbar represents the property of the temple. Yeah? And this guy, whenever the thing is in his hands, meaning the thing are in the hands of the temple. And the regulations are the regulations of the property of a temple, not the property of a private person. Now, the case of the Mishnah is someone hekdish. Hekdish is that if you decide to transfer something of your property to the temple, which this is basically most of the thing, you decide to transfer some of your property to the temple. You can do it in many ways. You can do it in korbanot, you can do it just in property in many ways. Here, he was doing he's doing it or she's doing it in that case. In the case of Isa, of a door. Yeah, you have a door, and then you said, okay, that's his property of God. I give it to the temple. And if now you can, Okay, let me explain another thing. You can, under certain, I'm shortening the whole discussion. You can give something to temple and replace it with something else. You can release it from that and instead give something else to the temple. Because, for instance, if you do something like something that is going to be, if you do the coffee, the coffee will last for 10 minutes. So basically, if I give now my coffee, I just give to God shit. So I can do something else. I cannot drink it because so what I can do, I say it without any real details, but think about it in this way. I can say, okay, this was €1. So I take €1 and give it to that, and now I can drink it. Okay, I bring it back from the status of sanctification into just a normal object in the world. Now, here we are speaking about the case of Isa. And what is the criteria of the case of Isa? When is it, if the door belongs to the temple, then it doesn't have to take challah out of it because it already belongs to the temple. So you don't take from the temple property thing that you give to the Kohen. And what is the moment of decision? That is Mishnah. That is still Mishnah, but this is Mishnah which already makes sense because it gives you the criteria of what is the time, what is the way. So there is the time that you roll the door, right? Yeah. And that is the moment. That is the decisive moment. So if so everything, and then he says, "Bechala hatam pashut." Why in challah it can be bread, and I still don't have to take challah out of it, because when is the time that this door have to be taken out? That have to take out of this door a certain portion for the Kohen. When? The time of the Gilgul, the time of the rolling. That's it. If it was at that time, now I'll skip the detail, but if at that time it was under it was already property of the temple, then I don't have, and that will be the rule. Okay, so that makes sense. But what about matzah? That will be the question, because challah I understand, okay, but what about matzah? אבל בתקנה אינה עומד לאכילת אדם ולא חיל בה שם לחם וממילא הרי פטורה לעולם. אוקיי, אבל במצה, and that will, yeah.
אבל במצה, הקשה, למה אין יוצאים בהחלט במצה, החזר ותשב עליה לאכילת אדם?
Yeah. So if we have the case of the Isat HaKlavim in Chala, so if the Isat HaKlavim in Chala and the time of Isat HaKlavim, it became not Isat HaKlavim, I changed my mind about it after the time that it was rolled, then I lost the time because there is a very specific there is a very specific definition of when is the time that it becomes that you are obliged to take challah, and if this time it was not lechem because it was for, then okay, then I will never have to. So that is the point that he says, you see, I can still think about something, but now it becomes lechem, but it doesn't matter in challah. I told you, that's what he says, yeah? I told you there is a subtle issue here. If something can become lechem and still I will not consider it that, therefore I will apply to that the rules of lechem, because the moment of the rolling it was not. But that is challah. What about matzah? How to deal with matzah? Because challah have its own rolling, and matzah ruling, and matzah has its own ruling. So what to do? And then he goes and aval b'matzah.
ולהכי הוא שהוסיף הרמב"ם טעמה דאינה משמרת לשם מצה.
זה רוצה לומר.
ורוצה לומר, מכיוון שבשעת עשית היסה אינה משמרת לשם מצה, אם כן,
על כורכך, ממילא,
אין יוצאים בה ידי חלטה מצה לעולם.
Okay, so he says, let's solve the problem. I will show you now why the Rambam was right, because the whole point of the Rambam now, with all the distinction that we made, there is a distinction between challah and matzah. Because if you change your mind, the thing becomes lechem, but challah, it's not, you don't take out of it because it's not the time of the rolling. If you did it. What about matzah? And then the Rambam add, "Mipnei she'ena meshumeret l'shem matzah." Now, that's I'm telling you, perhaps we'll discuss it tomorrow a bit more, but there are several discussions. What is the time that you have to do the guarding of the matzah, right? And the guard, and basically, it's very similar. It's like the time, no. It's not similar, but one of the stages is the stages of the dough. That is basically the last stage that you can do. After the thing is baked, you don't have to keep guarding the matzah. The moment that the thing is baked, it cannot be chametz again. That is the basic rule. Till the 18th century, when some crazy people in Poland, that's called Hasidim, came to the world and decided that they don't eat shmura, right? Before that, and that's what's craziness of Hasidim, that's without probably from being entirely unlearned people, and they decide that matzah can become chametz even after the baking. So they are very careful not to put, and there was a big thing, the story about the Vilna Gaon, the main thing of the Nagdim, was that that is a story. Elchanan, you know, perhaps if it's true or not, I don't know, but it's a good story and fit the person, that every Passover night, apart from the matzah that he's eating, he took matzah, put it in water, let it enough time to become chametz, and then was eating it to show that this is nonsense what they say. That matzah cannot become again after baking. So that was one of the very important. Until today, there are people who are very careful not to eat gebrocht, shvuya, something which is these French people. But for our issue, halachically, even those strange people know that if they ever open the book, they see, those of them who opens the book sometimes see that halachically, principally, the last stage that matzah can become chametz, or the process, is the time before the baking, the time of the dough. Yeah, that is the last time that you have to do shmira. Yeah, that you can perhaps, because there are machloket about that. Perhaps we will see that about tomorrow, because I want to come back to the very point of shmira, of matzah shmura. But there are view that it's much even before the time of the dough, and the time of the dough is too late. Never mind now, but that's, according to everyone, that can be the last. That cannot be after that. So he says, Maimonides has a very good point. He says, when is the time that you can change your mind about the matzah? If you can change your mind about the matzah, when it's still dough. After when it's not dough, it's too late. And therefore, and therefore he adds that point, because he says, I would think, okay, I can change my mind forever. And Mary says, yes, you can change my mind. I can change my mind, But it is without any impact on the question if I can eat it, because the question of if I can eat it is the last moment that I could have intention to be shmura, not to be matzah, to be shmura, right? That I do something in order to guard it. That's and that's the issue, the shmura, that we begin to just to touch the issue of shmura. That's we'll try to develop, but at the moment it's enough. So, but that is the last round. That's we have succeeded to show that that's the last round. That's Soloveitchik tried to save the Rambam and to make sense why we need this concept of shmura to add it, and its construction. It's further construction the one that we had before. I mean, it's more like complicated. It makes sense in the form that logically you can put that as, I mean, if you do hermeneutics in conceptual way and say, okay, that is what the Rambam says, that he adds, why the concept of shmura needs to be related here, then conceptually I can explain you. But that is the last round. Now it's the big failure, and now I think Reb Chaim begins. Now will come the big failure, and now the beginning of Reb Chaim, and now I will say, we'll try, how much time do we have?
45 minutes.
Oh, 45 minutes. So perhaps we'll see part of what I think is a brilliant point that he makes, and beginning to do, which is before the hermeneutics turn that he does. I mean, it's part of it, but the hermeneutic perhaps we'll discuss more tomorrow. But first, let's try to see here also the language of Soloveitchik begins. Up to now, it just was like you didn't hear his technical terms almost at all. So let's begin. Let's begin with the failure now. Yes.
אכן יש לדקדק עוד בדברי הרמב"ם במשמעות הטעם לפי שאינם משומרת לשם מצה, ואם כן, נמצא דעה פטורה מהחלה, דאין אדם יוצא בה ידי חובתו בפסח. שני דינים נפרדים ושני טעמים חלוקים.
Okay, so first, just that you're aware. When he mentioned here Shnei Dinim, it is not this concept of Shnei Dinim. In a moment we will see. Just look at the Shnei Te'amim Chalukim. That's what he means. It's not Tzvei Dinim here. It's not Shnei Dinim in that technical term. It's just like the editor is really bad. You should have told him, don't use here the term Shnei Dinim. But what does he says? What is the claim? The first claim. It's still not the question, but it's just the first claim, that first assumption. He says, according to what we said up to now. If you look at the yes, please.
You said, according to what we said until now, the din of matzah is an independent din from that of challah.
Yeah.
Right? And that challah requires intention at the moment of its formation, but for matzah there's an additional requirement that it's mishumeret l'shem matzah. So
yes.
that removes the possibility of reversing the intention.
Right. So we have two, I mean, we have the same din in the sense of what is the halacha. You cannot rethink challah and you cannot rethink matzah, but for two different reasons. One is shmartem et hamatzot, one is the issue of shmura, and challah is because at the time of the chiyuv, it's specifically to challah that you do that at the time of the isa. Independently, two things, and therefore we said that the Rambam makes sense. So it seems, he says, that's the assumption, okay, just repeat the assumption that he achieved in his explanation of the Rambam, and he wants to challenge it. This seems to be what we have said. Now, next, the ilu, בפירוש המשניות.
ואילו בפירוש המשניות כתב דעה דאינו יוצא בידי חובתו הוא משום בכל שאינו חייב בחלה, אינו יוצא לעיל.
לצורך עיון. Yeah, so we saw that from, we emphasized that point when we read the Perush Mishnah, right? That's the only thing that he speaks there is about chala. About Pesach, when he speaks about matzah, he speaks about chala. And he says, okay, these are two texts, and indeed, as I said, he is not committed to be them without contradiction. But it seems strange that, and that is for me the interesting point here. Here he begins, in contrast to the point before that he found a contradiction. He doesn't find here a problem that is important. It's not terrible to keep these two views as someone who is lamdan, at that time. It's okay. It's not like very beautiful, and I didn't find that because. Still, the Rambam says here like that and here like that, and still this is from chala and this is from matzah, and it's not. It sounds a bit, but okay, it's like it works. And he says it's strange. It's like that. Now that's the point that I want to show. That's the kind of the thing that he will replace it with. It's not like in order to solve an issue that cannot be solved by the regular, normal lamdanut, by the regular way of constructing or pilpul or whatever. There is something else. He tries to make sense in the text in a way that you can understand it, but let's see, is it really, we have seen so many similarities between chala and matzah. We have seen them together in so many ways. To say, I mean, he would say, for sure Soloveitchik could have come with something better in terms of contradiction now than just saying, it's not so strong. But he doesn't need a strong argument in order now to make the shift. That's the moment that he makes the shift without. Now, this is the moment, look, this book, I'll just show you my edition. With Elchanan yesterday, I used to have the Reb Chaim as it used to be in the yeshivot. This is not the book, yeah. If you haven't been to the yeshiva for 40 years and then you come back and Shaman show you this big book, you said no, it's kind of, because the book of Soloveitchik is that, yeah, and that is not. That is additions that they put. And the additions include several things. I mean, there are today many things. I just I cannot find my old edition, and you cannot find today clean edition of Reb Chaim. You have edition, you have Hagaot HaChazon Ish. Gilyonot HaChazon Ish, sorry. Gilyonot HaChazon Ish, it's things that the Chazon Ish wrote on Reb Chaim. Chazon Ish is, I will say it now is the old Lithuanian continue, and I say it like without, and there is no continuation and there is nothing like that, but continuation of the Gaon from Vilna style of studying, which goes to a certain kind of literal sense understanding without getting to look for the right version of the text, to look for things like that without, and Chazon Ish itself was in Bnei Brak. The story, the legend, and it's probably an urban legend, but I heard it a couple of times, that when he died, they found his book of Soloveitchik that he was starting from, and the book called Chidushei Rabbeinu Halevi Soloveitchik, and and the story is that he crossed Rabbeinu and wrote next to it, En Rabbeinu Ela Barishonim. That's only people that you can call Rabbeinu are the Rishonim. Now, there was a strong, nevertheless, if the story is true or not, it reflects something very serious. Chazon Ish understands that Reb Chaim comes with a new way of studying. He's unhappy, Lithuanian way of studying. Yeah, it's not like he's coming from. It's not like Elchanan can tell you about what the Hungarian rabbi would think about that. But I speak about the Lithuanian thing that's Soloveitchik come, and there are stories about him, and there are stories about Chazon Ish and Reb Shimon Shkop, which I don't discuss him at all here. But the story is that he said Reb Shimon Shkop is not Torah, is philosophy. That's another point. Now he represents, and I will not go now into the whole discussion, he represents a very, despite the fact that he was, or not despite, he was, Chazon Ish was a very fundamentalist Lithuanian continuation of the Gaon, which look for the real text, the real meaning, the true meaning of the text that I can reconstruct according to certain principles. He was like, in that respect, he had connection to the understanding of the text of this Lutheran understanding of the text. It was not the Bible, because he never heard about the Bible either, Chazon Ish, but it was the Talmud for him. Now, for the Gaon, yeah, the Gaon changed everything, which for instance, every minhag, every custom that was invented after the time of the Talmud or the Geonim, he says, the Gaon of the Vilnius Gaon erased. He says that is not, so there was a whole process of cleaning back the real text, and the Gaon was very much with the issue of very much involved with version of text. He loves versions. Yeah. And the Chazon Ish is a reaction to the new way of studying at the yeshiva. Chazon Ish was not a yeshiva, it was a yeshiva, but the old yeshiva, Lithuanian yeshiva of Vilnius, and so on, not the new Volozhin and Reb Chaim. And his cousin, by the way, which are doing the same thing, and therefore I think is Lieberman, Shaul Lieberman, the cousin of the Chazon Ish, which they studied together as teenagers. They were chavruta in I think you can see in both of them the same typical Protestant understanding of a text that's come from the Gaon. And Reb Chaim is something new. Now for him, now the addition that you see here, so there are Gilionot HaChazon Ish. That's the kind of questions that the Chazon Ish asks about Reb Chaim, and mostly suggests alternative to Reb Chaim explanation. Not that he disrespect Soloveitchik, because it was impossible. He was like, no one doubt that he's one of the important Talmudist ever, but try to push it out of the way of how do you study a text, and then here you have also other texts, never mind. But the point, let me go to the Chazon Ish. How the Chazon Ish is dealing with Soloveitchik. I don't have time, of course, to go through text, but the main point is like that. Oh, you have Kushia. Nice. I will give you the roots. Then you don't need your whole new system of learning. I solved your problem. Stop here. Don't go to your issues. As if Reb Chaim really needed the questions, the textual question, in order to. He really, in contrast to what I suggested you to read, how I suggested to read up to now. That's what is interesting for Soloveitchik, and that we will see in a moment, or when tomorrow, is not the text of Maimonides, is not the interpretation of the text of Maimonides, but it is the way that you interpret the text. And in contrast to the Chazon Ish, yeah, and for him, the issue is that what the Chazon Ish did to Reb Chaim, they both play in a way that it's a close game in that sense. Because what the Chazon Ish did for Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim could have had the Chazon Ish, he would have just added him to the text. He would say, oh, and there is another Kushia in the roots. And now I will ask, just do the same as what I did up to now. Yeah, up to this moment, Chazon Ish can play the same thing. And now he is beginning to do something new. So just a moment. So that's to complete the thing that I said. It's Reb Chaim didn't choose here any strong dismissive of what he said now. It's not like what he said the last solution. He says it doesn't look like. Let me try another thing. I will bring you from another point. It's a weak thing that Reb Chaim introduced in comparison to what he did up to now. This thing that's between the Perusha Mishnah and Yad Chazaka, it doesn't work together. Okay, so it doesn't. Who cares? And why do you have to be to take really the whole thing apart because of that? And I think it's almost purposely giving us. Let me now shift your view, the whole thing. And I will try to show you that there is a more point here. And now, yeah. Okay, trade DNA is the concept that we will discuss in terms of hermeneutics. This is the technical terms of Reb Chaim in terms of what the yeshiva. I mean, it's written trade DNA in Aramaic, sometimes written in Hebrew shnei DNA, sometimes written shnei dinim, and so on. The name of that the yeshiva is like the Yiddish terms when it's in a spoken. That is the written way. When it's spoken way, it's vei dinim. It's called always. And he says in Be'ikar hadin, we have din that something has to be guarded for the sake of matzah, right? And this thing you have to understand according to my principle. It's a principle that Reb Chaim uses the whole time, or a lot of time, much of the time. One of the principles that he's using in order to explain sugya, and you have to understand this concept of meshumeret l'shem matzah in this way, which we still don't explain what it is, of the tzvei dinim, which is actually just for the sake of, before we discuss what it means hermeneutically and what in Reb Chaim and beyond Reb Chaim, think about it for now as two aspects. Something has two aspects. So there are two aspects to this thing of being guarded for the sake of matzah.
עצם מעשה השימור שצריך לשמרה מחימוץ, שזה עיקר מצוות שימור. Okay, so the first thing is simple. What do you do in order to guard the matzah from chametz? You guard the matzah from chametz, right? That's what you do. You don't let it fall into water. You don't. You just guard it. That sounds like the odd. And now comes the other aspect, which will be the most interesting thing, and that's what we'll discuss now. ועוד יש בדין בהחפצה שיכול בה שם משומרת לשם מצה.
Okay, so let me just write it because it's just that you have to see what we are going to deal with. ועוד שיחול בה לא, שיחול בה שיחול בהחפצה, read it again.
יש בה דין בחפצה.
יש בה דין בחפצה
שיכול בה שם משומרת לשם מצה.
שיחול בה שם משומרת לשם מצה, okay? So look at that. We have din chefza שיחול שם. This is all technical terms of toleration that he's using and playing with. But let's try to just first a very simple thing. I will not then perhaps more also say why I think that the whole study of the yeshiva is the tradition. Let's go into that. Didn't understand the thing about it. But first we begin with chefza. This is the chefza is a concept that exists already in the Talmud, and in the Talmud is compared with gavra. There are things which are Chovat Gavra, it's my thing, and there are things which are related halacha, which is related to the Schechter. For instance, the difference between Nedarim and Shvuot is explained in the Talmud in this distinction. What applied to me and what applied to the object that we're speaking about. Okay, but this is not Reb Chaim. Don't confuse it with Reb Chaim. Think about the Schechter now as a concept of, I'm just saying it and then think about it as Schechter, yeah? But I'm just trying to make it the first moment before we get an object, but not but. Think about it first as an object. So what happens here? What does he say that's, okay, there is, in order for something to be Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah, first thing, I have to keep it, to guard it for Matzah. That is the first aspect. Now, what is the second aspect? What is this, what sounds like entirely nonsensical thing that's on the object of the Matzah should Yachul? It's another very problematic terms of Soloveitchik, very interesting, problematic, but it's something like something applied to something. I'm saying it now in a very simplistic way. Something like, and something that's applied here for something is, of course, the name. So on the matzah has to be, on the matzah, not the matzah, the hefza, the object, not the matzah, but the object, has to be applied a name that is the name of guarded. Now that sounds like nonsense, I know. But anyone wants to think, or what does it mean? That's what we have here as the second, as first aspect, the thing is guarded. And the second aspect is that you have the din, that you have like the name is chal without applied in this very general terms. All the terms that I'm using now are not accurate. I'm just like trying to apply to the hefza. Yeah, when the hefza is not the matzah, it's the hefza. And this and the name is applied to the matzah, and that is the second aspect of Meshumeret. Now, this is entirely. Anyone want to explain it? Everyone has an idea? Yeah.
I mean, one way to understand it, the first aspect of it seems to be completely practical shimur, right? One needs to watch the matzah such that it doesn't become pumice.
Yeah.
So, in contrast to that, it's much more difficult to explain the second aspect, but by contrast, we can say that it's not about having a kind of concrete entity that looks like a flat piece of cardboard in front of you. It's somehow something that is, whether metaphysically or with respect to its identity, possesses qualities that aren't just about the kind of tangible physical characters.
I think I will try. I have always tried. I'm trying to bring always a very an example in order to see how central this concept. I mean, this is concept that's this kind of formulation that Chaim uses the whole time, and this is still, remember, this is still not the hermeneutic term that's there. It's just like part of the Tzvei Dinim, the two aspects. But I still think before we go to the Tzvei Dinim, this is a brilliant, to my mind, one of the brilliant in the 20th century, one of the brilliant understanding of the concept of object in society. That Reb Chaim is always aware of that in a way, and that is not what the yeshivas after that understood in it. He's aware of that. I don't think he could have, he could probably, yes, but not in terms of, I don't think he cared about formulating in the way that I will formulate it, because he couldn't care less about these things. But I think he noticed that there is a very serious problem, or more than a problem, a very serious thing about ontology and our concept of halacha and so on. And let me give you an example that I think always, or a couple of examples that will try to make more sense of this abstract formulation. Yeah, my example is not,
we're in Germany, so I'm looking for someone who is working with Adidas. Don't know why. Now, let me speak about running shoes. Okay, you all know what. Oh, great. You're my example. There are running shoes, right? They have Nikes. Someone has nothing. Someone has, without any brand, and someone has Adidas. And okay, and I'm asking you, tell me what is running shoes Adidas, right? And you can tell me. It's very easy. You take this kind specific material of, I don't know, plastic, and you take to that, and you add 3 lines on the, and you do that, and you do that, and that is Adidas. And I said, yes, you're right. And then I sit at home and I do it, and I go to court, and they say, no, this is not Adidas, this is fake. I said, what do you mean it's not Adidas? I did exactly what you did, the same material. I can do it even in the same factory. I can do it whatever you want. And you say, no, it will not be Adidas. It's running shoes, not Adidas. What? I did it. Yeah, I broke into the factory at night and did it. Not only that, think about it that someone did this fake Adidas, and then he goes to the court, and then Adidas comes and say, okay, we know that there is this new hipster political in the world, and we know that there is this new Jesus Christian figure in Europe, which is called Greta. And you know that Greta will be very angry with us if we just take now the fake shoes and throw them to the garbage. So let's Adidas sell it as Adidas. And I said, no, you can't sell it as Adidas, but it's fake. I said, what do you mean it's fake? It's the same thing. But take how central it is, take the bill of the dollar, yeah, the real money, the only real money, the dollar. And I do the same things like the dollar, and you say me, not only that it's fake, you go to jail with that, but it's the same thing. So what is the difference? And then think about, of course, Van Gogh or whatever. You can do the same thing. That is the principle of property in our society. And we all, and I think I'm just trying to open this, the way that I think the insight that goes much behind Soloveitchik before the Tzvedim, before the analytical. There is a point, and in contrast to what mostly he is interpreted, the concept of Schechter is a very interesting thing because exactly he challenged the distinction between an object and the societal language, legal discourse that goes around. And he says there is a moment that a name is becoming part of the thing, and that is part of the thing. That you think as a thing, you are very primitive, and not only primitive, you cannot account for what an object in our world is if you think that you can account for the properties, the physical properties of that. That is not the object. The object is Adidas. And the Adidas is the moment that a name was attributed to the object, even not to the running, to the object of that running shoes, to the Schechter. I don't want now to. That is this thing. And he says these are the two things. You cannot, when you produce Adidas, the one thing that you do is produce Adidas, and the other thing that happens within that process, according to certain discourses, which you have to always to discuss. It can be legal, it can be cultural, it can be many journalists, it can be academic, whatever you want. There are different that you have to analyze and to discover the moment when the name of that process that you did and you call it the name becomes part of this object. Because the object is a social object. The object is never an object by itself. Yeah, and I think that is the two things that he thinks that every object in a way should. I take it back. Not every object, but I think that he thinks that it's a reasonable way to analyze certain kind of object in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when I'm hearing you explain this, I'm hearing sort of like a historian definition of like a sign, and like it's a material reference, and the name becoming indispensable reference. But I guess the example you give, I also wonder if it implies, at least with Adidas, this idea of like there being an authentic creator or an authentic nominator or an authoritative nominator who has to give or bestow upon the object that title, that name, or that sign. Is it authoritative in the case of what how Soloveitchik's understanding is sort of transitive relationship of the name to an object?
Not in that case, not necessarily, but yes, in other ways. Like for instance, Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah will be able to do only a Jew. For instance, only this. So it's not authoritative because only he is obliged to do the matzah, right? And someone who is only, never mind the whole process of why matzah shel kutim or matzah takum, even if it's not, even if you can eat it, we'll see it tomorrow. But even if you can eat matzah that is made by goyim, yeah, it's kosher for Passover, but you cannot use it as matzah in order to do the mitzvah of matzah. And because of Meshumeret will be the reason. And because the Meshumeret to the sake of matzah must be done by a certain person, in this case, a person who also has to be also obliged to do it. So, but the point is, before that, you go already to the to a certain kind of reference. I think it's much before that. It's the fourth. Yeah, first. Okay, let's put it like that. First, we are speaking at a moment of the late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century in Lithuania, right? With someone who never studied any linguistic theory or any philosophy, probably. I don't think, I mean, he was a very sophisticated person, but I don't think he ever studied. Perhaps he did. I never saw any reason to believe that he read anything apart from Moreh Nevuchim, perhaps somewhere, and I don't think he was very impressed by that either. That's the moment that we're speaking. We are still before the Tzvei Dinim, really, understanding what he's doing in terms of hermeneutics, which is much, this will be the main point of what I want to do, but I wanted to first already put this thing that he's using his Tzvei Dinim, and he already put, we have two aspects. One aspect is like, yeah, the Adidas, what we normally would call the Adidas. And one other aspect is what you don't think that you call the Adidas, but that's the real thing that you call the Adidas, and that's the name. And that's, you have to discuss how it gets. What is the moment that something in the social process of legal, linguistic, and so on, and that's what he discovers in Matzah Shmua. There is a moment, he will try to show, there is a moment when the name becomes part of the thing. Yes,
you've been using the term social to describe, or to at least as a sort of heuristic for understanding what Recline is doing here. One of the things that I've always struggled with Recline was the kind of what seems to be this metaphysical language that he uses, which seems to kind of remove definition. So I guess what I want to ask is, do you think that he would agree that Tzvei Dinim is helpful because every object has not only a physical, tangible, concrete dimension, but also one that is socially determined and constructed? Or would he say, no, actually, I'm talking about this like noumenal realm that we can't access, and the reason why the language has to be the way it is, and we have to talk about chefta and shame and etza and shame and all this, baloney, is because it's actually like it's ineffable in some way? Or is this just a product of the kind of sloppy editorial job that we have?
Okay. I would not, I mean, what I'm trying to do is actually to take away this mystica or even the metaphysical way of thinking. I really don't think he had any clue about these things. And his sensitivities are much more important because they are hermeneutical. He is trying, and therefore I'm exactly taking, for instance, the concept of Schechter, how he's using the concept of Schechter, and I think he's using it exactly, especially if you think about it, that is the early 20th century, even if it was like, someone would never use the concept of Schechter to include the social construct, linguistic social constructs around it. And that's exactly what he's using. The Schechter becomes part of what becomes the Hefza is the name. It's Chal on it, and then just 1 second, and just think about. I mean, we will see how he uses it. That is before the Tzvei Dinim. Yeah, Tzvei Dinim will get because this is for me the most important hermeneutically. That's what we do now is the preparation for the Tzvei Dinim issue. But the Tzvei Dinim, we just say that. I mean, we have the Tzvei Dinim, but we still don't understand what is as a hermeneutical, what is the hermeneutical importance of that. But which I will come to that. But at that moment, I just wanted to look at that, what he's doing many times in that way. And I think it's the opposite of what people ascribe to him. And not the opposite. It's like one level, it's entirely a different level. He tries exactly to find. I mean, it became like, you see afterwards, like, I thought perhaps, I thought before that, to bring perhaps someone from the Soloveitchik tradition and to show how they use this concept of Shem, Chal, and so on, and to show what is the difference. And then I found, I was looking for something just quick last week, and I found this shiurim from Rabbi Lichtenstein from Har Etzion, which is part of this. And then it was like, and I was shocked by the fact that he doesn't even see that what he's doing is chiluking. He doesn't do at all tzvei dinim. I will come back to that issue. That he can show, okay, there are objects like that, there are things like that. I will show that this is where it applies, this doesn't apply. In this case, he's organizing you a world, which is a perfect world, which is exactly the opposite of Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim is trying to take the most obvious concept and to show you the complexity of that thing in front of you, which is not Hefza, but the Hefza is exactly the name at some point. And he, with the text, he will show you when it happens and what we can say about it. It's not like just saying this slogan. It's like the hermeneutical work that he's trying is exactly to move us through the text till the point that I can show you that everything that I did before is based on something that I don't say. And that is this thing that happens there. And with, yes, sorry.
Okay, so we're not talking about grasping of the concept.
Mm-hmm.
So if you grasp something that many other people grasp, it's interesting in the condition. Comparison between what other features in his time, right before, right after, chains of thought start taking care of exactly this concept of the Hefza and the fetish, if you use a Marx terms.
That's true.
Or as or Heidegger's terms, or the log, the using logging terms, whatever, go back and start using different terms. But what bothers me is that's maybe continuing with the next question. He grasps something and then just like jumps on and continues, and he doesn't do more work to start checking different accounts that are possible to take care of this thing that he realized. That this Hefza is a complex Hefza, I agree. That you could play with these concepts in different ways. You could play with the complicity with different ways. And that's something that seems to do, that he's just like thinking, okay, I found something, now I continue on and say whatever I want about it. And my only obligation is to the hermeneutics, so I still don't know how to take care of that.
Right. Okay. I don't have a complete answer to your question. I have some thought about it. I think that first is already a very great achievement if you can say that textual complexity. I can show you how name is attached to an object that you cannot distinguish between them anymore. That is already a great achievement for someone who do hermeneutics, that says what you thought an object and what you thought it's like just a discourse and so on. I show you the moment that when they are coming together in a way that it's like, now you have to see it like that. If he does it or not, it's another question. But let's assume for a moment that he succeeds to the first moment to show you. Then it's already quite a great achievement for an hermeneutician, that he just look at the text and show you how reality is basically created with text. That's the thing that we all go to buy. It also captures here something. I mean, you know, that there is no, in the halachic text of Matzah Shmua, I don't remember, perhaps very late, I'm not sure even that there is anywhere in the tradition of Matzah Shmua that it's written Matzah Shmua. It's always Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah. But when you and I and everyone goes to Pesach and when we go to buy Matzah Shmua, we go to buy an object, which is matzah shmura. We don't buy matzah meshumeret, etc., etc. You go to your bodega and you say, "Give me, please, matzah shmura." And he captures here, I think, something which, like the Adidas, when you go to the shop, you ask Adidas. He captures here something that I think he will be able to show this object that we are familiar with in relation to the importance of the text as part of reality. Now, this, what I say now, he would never formalize it like that, right? I don't think he had the concept of reality. It's entirely, there is no concept of reality in rabbinic text. What is real? Real is like something that's, especially the reality of philosophical reality comes from the medieval Christian philosophy and goes back like the real in Descartes in modernity and Spinoza and so on. And it's like something very different from any rabbinical Talmudist. I don't know if rabbinical, perhaps the Maharal could have related to that, but Talmudist, will have a problem with this. But okay, forget about that now. That is a comment that we can discuss in another. Yeah. Sorry.
I wonder when I read the text, I wonder if the best way to account for the distinction is to say reality or the object itself or the physical and textual or social, because it seems to me that from the very beginning he's not talking about an object, he's talking about him. He's already in the sense, he's already in the text. Mm-hmm. The entity that he talks about is not an object, it's a text, and the text is Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah. And it's interesting because this entity, so to speak, has... That's the Shem. Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah is Shem, and... No, he says... Sheyachol ba... Adim Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah... Okay, later he's... Okay, right. And so he takes this entity, and which of course we know it designates an object at the end. The entity itself is not an object, it's dim. And then there is two ways of already hermeneutics of reading this. One of them is to read it as describing the action of the shamer or shmo, doing what you need to do in order to that you account for that you realize this action to take and guard and so forth, which is one thing. And the other thing is that you would say this action leads to the production of an object that we call Meshumeret L'Shem Matzah. But he said it is not the same thing. There is an object at the end, maybe that has the name of this, but it's not the same thing. That the action, you could look at it as the action led to the production of an object that has the name. But you said that we should differentiate because exactly as you said, sometimes they're not the same thing. sometimes we'll end up with an object with this name without having passed through this.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll pass through this and will not have the object.
Right. So therefore, I mean, you're right. I qualified my thing that I said at the beginning, and I said I'm using now the term object, right? And the term is Schechter. Now, what is Schechter? I said first think about it like an object. That was my first thing. What is Schechter is something which I cannot define. I will try to say more about it tomorrow, but I cannot really tell you what is Schechter. I think, but okay, let me begin from another point. He introduced here, I mean, see, I don't want now to waste my time, but I think if I want, I can now erase this whole nonsense of Tzvei Dinim and Schechter and Shiachul Bashem and etc. and tell you that in the classical way as another explanation. I will tell you there is din of you have to do the process of guarding and so on. And in addition to that, there is this din that the process of guarding has to be, and that's tnai in that you have to do this with the kavone, that's with the intention, that's it will be for meshumeret, and that's I know from that, and I get rid of the whole language here of what he did. Yeah, and it works in terms of tools. But and he insists to bring this crazy language that he invents, or part of it he invents, part of, I mean, it doesn't, Tzvei Dinim is the only thing I think that he really invents as a concept. The other concepts like din, like Schechter, like Shem, like Gzera Sakotov, like, I don't know, there are certain things, all of them are concepts that he uses in a new way. As a technical concept, but I think the only place that you can say Tzvei Dinim is the only thing that he uses. That's, I don't know anything that is used before that, like this term. Except if, but you can use, yeah, okay. Perhaps I'm not familiar. Did you ever see something like? The only the point. Now is like, for me, is to say, okay, I can explain it in different ways, like a classical people, but that will miss the point, and that we'll see when you come to explain tomorrow the Tzvei Dinim itself, or I will try. But before that, I say, okay, he comes and introduces this concept, and I want somehow to see the sense of what this concept are, and therefore I brought the case of the Adidas or the case of that and so on, because I think what he's doing, he's trying to figure out something about Matzah Shmura and the way that it is what it is in very general terms. And he says that's what the text makes here is something general. It's not something related to Matzah Shmura or something like that. There is something in the world that I will explore through the analysis of this text and many other texts. And that will explain also the text later. We'll have to reread now all of our text, and we'll have to reread them under a new principle, which is the Tzvei Dinim that we'll discuss tomorrow. What does it make with the whole thing? But at the moment, I just wanted to show that there is, for me, it's always like a very brilliant move of someone at the beginning that's take a text and from it show how an object is created through a text. That you cannot distinguish between them. And if you follow it, I mean, we didn't follow it yet and so on, but if you follow it, it's a very radical, convincing view of something that's happened between an object, which again, it's not an object, and a text, which is not a text, okay? But for the sake of the terminology that we have, and he, at the table of the knowledge that existed at his time, which he didn't know or knew, but we know that. Okay, questions more? Or, yeah.
Maybe we should go back to the example of the Adidas. Is it worthwhile to explore it and to understand it? Because if I understand it, I speak differently. Like, if I'm talking about differentiation, and you were talking about becoming one. So when I think about the Adidas, the fake Adidas, it's actually never fake because it's Adidas.
But it's fake.
But because of the name Adidas, it's Adidas.
Yeah, but
I mean, when I see a shoe with 3 stripes and whatever, I see Adidas because there is the name Adidas.
yeah, but I'm asking you, I mean, the point is that it makes sense for us to speak about fake Adidas. That is the strange thing, right? It makes sense to speak about a fake dollar, fake Adidas, fake Van Gogh. Why? It can be exactly the same thing, and it still makes sense in our whole, the whole concept of art and the whole concept of monetary system is based on that there is fake, right? You cannot have art today if there is no concept of fake, because you have then to close all the museums, all the galleries, all the art dealing, everything this falls down, right? We have this concept, and you know that you can see exactly the same Van Gogh. I mean, we all know that it doesn't matter if you see this Van Gogh or someone who does exactly the same in the whatever way, the most talented person, or next year it will be the, what? That's exactly what I want to say. The next year it will be 3D printer that does exactly, will be at the same materials, everything. And it will be exactly the same. And we know that it is fake. And I say, what can it mean?
But it doesn't.
But the name means that there is no fake.
No,
but the fact that you would say about one thing, this is Van Gogh, the fact that we say it, yeah, I will tell you, no, look, this is Van Gogh, but this is not Van Gogh. Right? That's what I will tell you. And we say, okay, yeah, so that's worth $100 million, and that's, you can put in the toilet, in the bathroom. And I say, but what is the difference? The object is the same. The process of production is, in case of Van Gogh, is not the same. But in the case of Adidas, it can be the same. Or the case of the dollar, it can be the same. So the point is that it makes sense to us, this thing which doesn't make sense. Why? Why would say that this is not the same? Why we have museums of this ridiculous Van Gogh when you can do it like in the 3D printers? Yes, we did.
The concept of the naming, the branding, is like Adidas, the true Adidas. You pay the price for it. You pay the price for the naming, and you pay the price for the fake Adidas as well, which is much lower, which already shows you that it has lost worth. So it must be something different.
Well, the name implies that it's the same.
No, the name, exactly. The name is not the same.
The question is how you get to name.
Yeah.
If you call up a picture today Van Gogh, not because Van Gogh painted.
Yeah.
And maybe there are paintings of Van Gogh that we don't call Van Gogh.
Exactly.
Because we call something Van Gogh today because there is a whole system according to which we agree or we don't agree to big names.
And it's like the exhibition now in New York where they put Van Gogh as like a total immersive experience and like project paintings. So then should they be advertising it as the full Van Gogh experience? You know?
Yeah.
There is a difference between Van Gogh and Adidas. Van Gogh is something in the material and the age of the this and the dollars. Or other examples, the issue is that you get license or it's unlicensed or unauthorized. And I think that's what makes it
But all of you are saying so the name doesn't mean anything. I'm saying that the name means everything.
No, yes, it's not about the name.
Like the Van Gogh and the Van Gogh. That's what I'm saying.
It's not the Van Gogh. What we call Van Gogh is some institutions made some rules according to which you recognize or not something is Van Gogh.
So they don't
accept
the name.
What?
They don't accept the name. I accept the name.
But
so when I decide sunflowers, I know this is Van Gogh.
You don't know. You accept a certain.
I accept the name.
Yes, but I mean, you don't accept the name. The name was decided. I mean, as a person, you can say I want or do not want, but the name, the attachment of the name to the object has an objective social existence, even if you say I don't agree, it will still.
Look, if you are going to take, sorry.
No, you could sometimes. If we separate, but you were saying that we don't.
No, I'm saying that this is the problem of, this is exactly the problem itself. If you take now, you say, okay, I see this photo, this picture, and I think it's Van Gogh, and you are going to sell it in the world as Van Gogh, you are going to jail. And we all will all say that it's right. Why do you sell fake Van Gogh? This is not Van Gogh.
So we resist the name.
We don't.
No,
you understand me.
I understand, but I think it's like
that maybe that is easier because I understand this is an Adidas, this is an Adidas because of the name.
Yes.
It makes both objects to be entirely the same.
Yeah, but the name is something that's applied for something, and it's something that came to the Schechter, how you say it.
There's an apply, you apply, and there's an apply.
Yeah, but the issue of the applying is not the question of the moment that it's being applied and accepted as applied according to that. It's what I will relate to the object as. This is Adidas. Give me two Adidas, please. Go to the shop and say, give me two Adidas. You don't want fake Adidas. Anyway, okay, we'll keep doing it tomorrow and see. Thank you.